the average age here is about 30, and I would like to know, really, Akshay, how relevant is his work today?
Well, this is a bit of a difficult question because there are tropes and themes which are there in Nasir Hussain's cinema right through. The romantic couple setting out on a journey. Now you see that even in I think Aditya Chopra acknowledged this in his book to you, that Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge is basically an amalgamation of three filmmakers' sensibilities. He says there is Manoj Kumar in that, in the sense of the love for the Des. There is Raj Kapoor's passion of romance, and there is Nasir Hussain's protagonist setting out on a journey, which is what Shah Rukh and Kajol. So there are those themes. There are filmmakers still today who are celebrating music, who are integrating music very well into their storylines. When it comes to the overall, that suspension of disbelief that we call, well, Hindi cinema doesn't seem to, has moved away from that kind of storytelling, which is slightly unfortunate. But there are shades of Nasir Hussain that are present, not entirely, but not also, it's not like it's not there. There are filmmakers who still celebrate song and dance the way Nasir Saab used to.
We are going to talk at length about Nasir Saab, but just before we open and ask the others questions, I'd like to know about the collaboration with Vijay Anand, because clearly it worked a dream.
Yeah, I think one of the things that happens with Tisri Manzil is that it is such a fine coming together of great cinematic personalities. It's not just, there's this thing about cinema that, even we film critics or people who write on films sometimes are guilty of, that there's this lionizing that happens, that, this film belongs to this personality or this film belongs to this personality. But I think Tisri Manzil is a very good example of collaborative cinema at its best. I mean, I can't even imagine this film without, let's say, a few of the cameo performances that are there. I mean, K.N. Singh, for example, or Rashid Khan.
Mention Iftikhar also.
Iftikhar also. And, Helen G, her performance in that song, Vijay Anand, Nasir Hussain. See, Vijay Anand, Nasir Hussain, both that Nav Ketan and Nasir Hussain films, that modern style, the urban spaces, these are those filmmakers. They're not like Mehboob Khan and V. Shantaram, who are talking about nation building or Nehruvian socialism. Their cinema is more, it's very urbane, it's modern, there is a celebration of club culture. Both men had this fascination for a certain kind of crime storytelling. Almost every Nasir Hussain film begins with a crime of sorts. Someone is shot dead accidentally, and then there is a reconciliation or a reunion that happens. So that worlds merge very well with Vijay Anand and Nasir Hussain.
In fact, I was quite struck by how many shots would look like Hitchcock in this film.
Yes.
With the framing and the lighting and even the whole business about identity. These various women who appear, they all appear like the Vertigo character. You don't know who they are really.
I was if you look at Tisri Manzil, and this is probably something that I discussed with Mansoor also, just the second, after the credits roll, I think Shweta was there, I was actually telling her, the second shot in the film, just after Raj Mehra's face is shown, Asha Parekh ji's father in the film, just after his face is shown and there's a cut, the next shot, believe you me, I have timed it, it is 84 seconds long. And this is classic Vijay Anand territory. Nasir Hussain doesn't indulge in such long takes, which tells that here is an author at work.
What I think is also fascinating is the fact that Nasir Saab understood how to bring alive the characters through words and dialogue. And the dialogue delivery in his films are fabulous because you get every joke, which is quite rare, and the diction, and it's also very rooted in a certain cultural background. Well, now, sometimes they're forced jokes or, they're not very funny, but he is absolutely in his world, very intact. And then you have Vijay Saab, who uses the camera when you need it. And he also doesn't use the camera when he doesn't need it. So I think when you say you need a long shot, you have actors who can hold the shot. And they both have this wonderful thing. They have actors who can say the words, and they have actors who can act in front of the camera. Now, we're not going to get too technical because it's suddenly gone very quiet in here. I think we're going to start by asking Nusrat, At what point in your childhood, and I would love all three of you to join in because you have the rare privilege of having grown up under his roof. I'd like to ask you, when did you realize that Nasir Saab was a famous man?
I've never ever thought about that. I don't know. While I was watching the film today, I was pointing out to my nephew sitting here every scene which I remember being there on set. I didn't know what was going on. I knew something was going on. The Aja Aja set and, Oh Hasina, Sona Re Sona. I seem to remember more of the songs. I don't think I knew what my father was doing. I knew it was his work. No, I didn't understand fame.
And even I never, it's never occurred to me that Jajan was famous or something. Because I think he was such a normal person, that he didn't have any airs about him or that entire star, thing. And he was one of the most successful filmmakers of his time. But he was very normal and casual, so I don't think he, really exuded that kind of air. And so none of us, it never occurred to me that,
Mansoor, what about you?
Well, you'll be surprised. I saw Teesri Manzil maybe 15 years after it released. So I was totally disconnected with what was happening. So forget whether my father was famous or not. But yes, I did feel we were privileged. I knew that he's someone special. I didn't know about fame as such, but yeah, we felt privileged and stuff like that. But I think to extend what Aamir is saying is that he was not a filmy personality, or rather he didn't have big bashes. He didn't have a lot of hanger-ons. He didn't have he would have one party in a year that was his birthday, when everybody was there, and I would go around with an autograph book and try and get everybody's autograph. But yeah, that night felt very special. That night I could feel that he was very, very famous, yeah.
I just wondering then, what were the kind of conversations you had at meal times with him?
It was not films, that's for sure. My dad, he used to go in the morning to the office, and he used to come back for lunch, and then he would go back again, and he would come back by, I think, 6 or 7?
6:30.
6:30. It wasn't even dark yet, and he would be back home every single day. I don't think that happens anymore.
I don't think it ever happened. For example, my life, very rarely do I come home by 6:30.
You mentioned that in the foreword, that he had a beautiful work-life balance.
Yeah, so it was amazing to see the balance that Jajan had with his, what Nusrat is saying, he loved his work, but he was, as much with the family, and somehow he used to manage to come home every day at 6:30. I don't know how.
And that was it. Then he was with us. But what he did do, after he had come home and showered and got dressed in his white crisp kurta pajama, which was his home wear, and I think at an appropriate time, mix himself a drink and put the music on. So every evening was full of music, every single day.
And what would he listen to?
I'll let you answer that.
My dad was always wanted to be on the cutting edge of music sound coming. He wanted to, in fact, when I reflect, one of my favorite bands was Emerson, Lake and Palmer, which is not a band that most people listen to. It's that my dad had bought that cassette, and so he introduced me to it actually. Pink Floyd, he had brought on his London trip, and there were many such albums which actually I got exposed to because he had bought it. So yeah, he wanted to, and he had this Zenith radio, and on that he would tune in onto world music, and that was a big part of the evening. So music was a very big part of his inspiration. And
He also had a turntable in his car, which so he had a turntable in his car. Like now earlier we used to have cassette players, and then now we have whatever CD players, and now we have just Bluetooth or whatever. But at that time, turntables like records. To have a record player in a car which bumps around and all that. It is very rare. So he used to have a turntable in his car.
Fantastic, because I mean, how did he keep it steady?
Some,
There was some good technical stuff.
yeah, there was some heavy duty, some, what is it called? Suspension that was done, yeah. Sometimes a song used to bounce.
Just kind of hop a little bit.
And you mean he didn't listen to filmy music, Hindi film songs?
No,
Yeah, I don't
it was
know.
always Western music.
It was always.
Interesting.
I just want to add over here that this was a question I asked all three of them when I was researching for the book, that what was the music that he was listening to, and they said this, that it was essentially Western, and Nusrat said, Top of the Pops, and Beatles, Elvis Presley. But Aamir also made one very good point over there. He said, yes, Western music is fine, but Chacha Jaan had a knack for a popular tune. He knew ye gana hit hone wala hai. So it's not just Western music, but he had that flair for a popular song.
Yeah, I can add, because my interest in what Daddy was doing was mainly the music. I used to enjoy, and the story sittings, not the shooting so much. So the music sessions were very, very fun to watch, and I had become used to the idea that I know which tune my dad's going to like. And like when I used to watch him with Pancham Uncle, and Pancham Uncle used to sweat before my dad came over because he was a tough customer to please. And I remember that, and he had a little dibia with pan in it. So he'd sit and after the tune, he would do this. He did that, and the tune was rejected. Ugly. So I knew it's gone. So these are little idiosyncrasies which I imbibed, and only later when I never thought I'd make films, but only much later did I realize how much of an intuitive tune sense he had. And it was not because he played the piano or the guitar or knew notation. It was just an inbuilt judgment of what is a good tune.
You are obviously a film family now, and 3 generations. Can you tell me, your father, I have to give a little aside here, I think it was some years ago, I actually want to know exactly the year, but it was Aamir who said to me, absolutely you have to go and interview my uncle. And he took me to the house, and Nasir Sahab was a little reluctant. I think Mansoor vanished very quickly.